Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice stands as one of the most enduring and beloved novels in the English literary canon. First published in 1813, this masterwork continues to captivate readers more than 2 centuries later with its penetrating social commentary, memorable characters, and the timeless exploration of love, marriage, and personal growth. The novel has transcended its historical context to remain remarkably relevant to contemporary audiences, offering insights into human nature that resonate across generations and cultures. Through her witty narrative voice and keen observation of society, Austen crafted a work that functions simultaneously as romantic fiction, social satire, and psychological character study. The novel centers on Elizabeth Bennet, the spirited protagonist who refuses to conform to societal expectations regarding marriage and social status. Her journey from initial prejudice to understanding and love forms the narrative backbone of the story, while the broader canvas depicts the marriage market of Regency-era England. Austen's subtle critique of her society's obsession with wealth, status, and advantageous marriages continues to resonate with modern readers who recognize similar pressures and societal expectations in their own times, historical and social context. To fully appreciate Pride and Prejudice, one must understand the historical moment in which it was written. The early 19th century in England witnessed significant social stratification, where a woman's future prospects depended almost entirely on securing a suitable marriage. The inheritance laws of the period, particularly the system of entailment, created situations where family estates passed to male heirs, leaving daughters without independent financial security. For women of the middle and upper middle classes, marriage was not merely a romantic aspiration, but an economic necessity. The novel reflects this reality through the plight of the Bennet family. With no sons to inherit their estate, the 5 Bennet daughters face the prospect of reduced circumstances upon their father's death. The entailment of the Bennet estate to their cousin, Mr. Collins, emphasizes the precarious position of unmarried women in this society. Mrs. Bennet's desperate pursuit of suitable husbands for her daughters is not merely mercenary ambition, but a logical response to genuine economic insecurity. Austen's portrayal of Regency society also captures the elaborate social rituals that govern courtship and marriage. The importance of social calls, balls, and public appearances in facilitating introductions and maintaining social standing was paramount. Women's participation in society was carefully choreographed, with strict conventions governing behavior, conversation, and physical contact between unmarried individuals. Austen uses these constraints as both backdrop and satirical target, showing how her heroine navigates and sometimes subverts these restrictive social codes. The author's life and literary context. Jane Austen lived during a transitional period in literature and society. Born in 1775, she came of age during the Romantic period, yet her sensibility remained distinctly neoclassical in its emphasis on reason, propriety, and social observation. She never married, though the novel's exploration of marriage and its discontents draws from her observations of family and society rather than personal romantic experience. This distance afforded her a certain perspective and freedom in her social criticism. Austen wrote within a tradition of the domestic novel and was influenced by the works of earlier female writers like Frances Burney and the satirical traditions of male writers like Henry Fielding. However, she elevated the domestic sphere and female experience to subjects worthy of serious literary treatment at a time when such material was often dismissed. Her novels center women's experiences and perspectives, treating their concerns with the same gravity that male writers accorded to military campaigns, political intrigue, or adventure narratives. The publication history of Pride and Prejudice is itself interesting. Austen originally drafted the novel as first impressions when she was approximately 21 years old. Her father attempted to have it published, but without success. Austen revised and refined the manuscript over many years before its eventual publication in 1813 under the author attribution by a lady. This long gestation period allowed the work to develop into its final Polished form. Character. Analysis. Elizabeth Bennet. Elizabeth Bennet emerges as perhaps the most significant female character in early 19th century literature. She is remarkable for the agency and self-determination she exercises within the constraints of her time and social position. From the novel's opening, Austen establishes Elizabeth as intelligent, perceptive, and independent-minded. She reads voraciously, walks across the countryside unaccompanied, and refuses to pretend to feelings she does not possess. Elizabeth's defining characteristic is her commitment to authentic judgment despite social pressure. She famously asserts her refusal to marry without love, a radical position for her time when marriage was primarily an economic arrangement. This commitment to her own standards places her in direct conflict with her mother and society's expectations. Yet Austen presents this independence not as romantic rebellion, but as a realistic assessment of what constitutes a bearable life. The novel's title derives from Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy's initial flaws, her prejudice against him and his pride regarding his social superiority. Elizabeth's prejudice is not irrational bias, but a judgment formed from limited information, influenced by her trust in Mr. Wickham's plausible charm. Her journey involves recognizing how her preconceptions prevented her from seeing Darcy clearly. This is not a complete reversal of her character, but a refinement of her judgment through additional information and reflection. What makes Elizabeth particularly compelling is Austen's presentation of her growth without suggesting she was fundamentally wrong. Elizabeth was right to be skeptical of Darcy's initial behavior, right to distrust Wickham's superficial charm, and right to resist pressure to marry someone she did not respect or love. Her evolution involves learning to distinguish between justified skepticism and unfounded prejudice, between self-respect and stubborn pride. Character analysis. Mr. Darcy. Darcy initially appears as the archetypal proud gentleman, apparently arrogant and dismissive of those he considers his social inferiors. His behavior at the opening ball, particularly his insulting comment regarding Elizabeth's appearance, establishes him as disagreeable. Austen uses the first half of the novel to complicate this initial assessment, revealing that Darcy's behavior, while often appearing proud, stems from different sources than simple arrogance. Darcy's reserve and apparent disdain for social interaction reflect his integrity and honesty rather than mere snobbery. He refuses to engage in the superficial flirtation and flattery that characterize the social performances of lesser characters. His protection of his friend Bingley from a potentially unsuitable marriage reflects genuine concern rather than controlling interference. His treatment of the servants and dependents at Pemberley, as Elizabeth observes, suggests a responsible stewardship and genuine care for those under his charge. The revelation of Darcy's true character comes through Elizabeth's visit to Pemberley, and particularly through his letter explaining his actions regarding Wickham and his interference in Bingley's courtship. The letter demonstrates Darcy's honesty even when candour works against his immediate interests. He explains himself not to win Elizabeth's affection, but because he cannot bear her to think ill of him based on false information. This integrity, more than any romantic gesture, wins Elizabeth's respect and eventually her love. Darcy's journey parallels Elizabeth's. He must learn to see beyond his initial prejudices and social conditioning. His pride in his superior judgment and his tendency to judge others by his own standards blind him to the perspectives of those he considers his inferiors. His growth involves recognizing that social position does not determine personal worth, and that his habitual judgments may be mistaken. Secondary characters and social types. Austen. His novel gains much of its power through its rich cast of secondary characters, each representing distinct social types and human follies. Mrs. Bennet embodies the anxieties of mothers dependent on their daughters' marriages, but she is presented with enough specificity and humanity that she never becomes a mere caricature. Her nervous energy, social ambitions, and occasional kindness make her a recognizable human being rather than a simple satirical figure. Mr. Bennet represents a different type of parental inadequacy, the intelligent man who has abdicated his responsibilities through irony and detachment. His habit of observing family dramas with amusement rather than attempting to guide them reflects a particular masculine privilege and a failure of duty. His affection for Elizabeth does not excuse his neglect of his family's interests and his wife's deficiencies. Mr. Collins embodies social climbing and sycophantic behaviour. His obsequious attention to Lady Catherine de Bourgh and his transparent self-seeking reveal the social dynamics that reward conformity and punish individuality. His proposal to Elizabeth and his satisfaction with her rejection, since it allows him to pursue Charlotte Lucas, demonstrate how thoroughly he is motivated by social advantage rather than genuine emotion. Charlotte Lucas, Elizabeth's closest friend, represents the pragmatic choice that many women of the period faced. Her acceptance of Mr. Collins, made not from love or even liking, but from economic necessity and the recognition that better prospects may not materialize, presents a counterpoint to Elizabeth's uncompromising position. While Austen treats Charlotte with some sympathy, understanding the logic of her choice, the contrast with Elizabeth clarifies the stakes of Elizabeth's refusal to settle. Jane Bennet, Elizabeth's beloved older sister, is gentle, kind, and beautiful but lacks Elizabeth's insight and independence. Her excessive modesty and inability to express her own feelings create barriers to her happiness with Bingley. Her character demonstrates how even virtue and attractiveness cannot guarantee favourable outcomes for women in a constrained society. Mr. Wickham functions as the novel's prime seducer and deceiver. His superficial charm, apparent openness, and conventional attractiveness initially fool Elizabeth and most of the other characters. Only through investigation and careful attention to evidence does his true nature emerge. His attempted elopement with Lydia and his marriage to her, motivated entirely by monetary incentive, reveal his complete lack of moral principle. Beneath his pleasant surface, Lady Catherine de Bourgh represents aristocratic arrogance and the tyranny of social convention. Her attempt to prevent Elizabeth's marriage to Darcy, her imperious manner, and her assumption that social position grants unlimited authority all receive Austen's satirical treatment. Yet even Lady Catherine possesses enough specificity to transcend simple caricature. Themes and intellectual content, the marriage plot and women's agency. While Pride and Prejudice is often categorized as a romance novel, its engagement with marriage extends far beyond romantic sentiment. Austen explores marriage as an institution, a social necessity, an economic arrangement, and a source of either companionship or misery. The novel presents multiple marriages representing different possibilities. The marriage of Elizabeth and Darcy represents intellectual and moral equality, mutual respect, and genuine affection. Both characters have developed beyond their initial flaws, and their union promises partnership based on understanding rather than economic necessity or superficial attraction. The marriage of Charlotte and Mr. Collins represents pragmatic arrangement without affection. Charlotte has secured economic stability but resigned herself to a life without emotional resonance or intellectual companionship. Austen does not condemn this choice as foolish, but rather presents it as a realistic assessment of Charlotte's limited options. The marriage of Lydia and Wickham represents disaster and irresponsibility. Lydia's elopement with Wickham, driven by mere physical attraction and thoughtless rebellion, results in a union based neither on affection nor stability, but on financial coercion. The couple's superficial happiness masks the absence of genuine partnership. The marriage of Mr. and Mrs. Bennet presents a cautionary example of fundamental incompatibility. Their union, based apparently on physical attraction without intellectual or moral accord, has resulted in mutual contempt. Mrs. Bennet's constant chatter distresses Mr. Bennet, who retreats into ironic observation rather than engaging with his wife or addressing family problems. These various marriages collectively suggest that marital happiness depends less on social status or economic advantage than on mutual respect. compatible temperaments and shared values. Austen argues, implicitly but powerfully, for marriage as partnership rather than mere economic arrangement. Social class and economic reality. The novel's exploration of social class and economic circumstance operates on multiple levels. Austen neither argues for eliminating class distinctions nor accepts them as natural or inevitable. Rather, she exposes the arbitrary nature of social hierarchies while simultaneously acknowledging their practical reality. The encounter between Elizabeth and Lady Catherine illustrates the power dynamics of class. Lady Catherine assumes that Elizabeth, as a woman of inferior social station, will obey her commands. Elizabeth's refusal and her assertion that she cannot be commanded regarding her own marriage represents a claim for personal agency that transcends class boundaries. Yet Elizabeth does not deny the reality of class difference. She simply refuses to allow it to determine her most intimate decisions. The Pemberley visit allows Elizabeth to reassess her judgment of Darcy, partly through observing his property and estate. Yet Austen presents this not as Elizabeth being dazzled by wealth, but as gaining insight into Darcy's character through the evidence of how he manages his responsibilities and treats his dependents. His wealth matters less as status symbol than as enabling factor in demonstrating his values. The financial insecurity of the Bennet daughters creates urgency and realism to the marriage plot. The entailment of the Bennet estate and the resulting economic vulnerability of unmarried women is not presented as melodrama, but as consequence of specific laws and economic structures. Austen's treatment suggests that these structures are problematic precisely because they place women in such dependent and vulnerable positions. Self-deception and judgment. A central preoccupation of the novel is how we form judgments, particularly the ways in which self-interest, emotion, and social conditioning distort our perception. Elizabeth initially trusts Wickham because his appearance and manner conform to her expectations, because he flatters her, and because she dislikes Darcy for his pride. Her prejudice against Darcy prevents her from judging him fairly until new evidence and reflection alter her view. Yet, Austen does not suggest that Elizabeth's error renders judgment impossible or that all interpretations of character are equally valid. Rather, good judgment requires careful observation, willingness to revise initial assessments when presented with new evidence, and awareness of one's own biases and interests. Elizabeth's eventual fair judgment of Darcy and Wickham reflects not abandonment of judgment, but its refinement through greater knowledge and self-awareness. Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Bingley demonstrate how optimism and amiability can lead to poor judgment. Mr. Bingley, though attractive and genuinely good-natured, lacks the judgment to see through Wickham's charm or to make independent decisions. His ease and willingness to please make him susceptible to influence from others, particularly Darcy, whose judgment he trusts. The theme of self-deception extends to how characters understand their own motivations. Lady Catherine genuinely believes she acts from principle and concern for propriety, not acknowledging her desire to control those around her. Mr. Collins truly believes he is acting correctly in his obsequiousness to Lady Catherine, not recognizing how completely he has sacrificed independence and dignity. Wit, irony, and narrative voice Austen's prose style, characterized by wit, irony, and psychological penetration, remains one of the novel's greatest achievements. Her narrative voice maintains a subtle, ironic distance from the action, allowing readers to recognize follies and pretenses that the characters themselves cannot see. The famous opening line regarding wealthy, unmarried men and wives announces this ironic register. The statement is presented as obvious truth, while actually being a socially constructed assumption that Austen proceeds to interrogate. Austen frequently employs free indirect discourse, allowing us access to characters' thoughts while maintaining narrative distance. We understand Mrs. Bennet's anxious preoccupations from her perspective, while simultaneously recognizing the narrowness of her concerns. We comprehend Mr. Bennet's intellectual amusement at family dramas while perceiving The evasion and irresponsibility this amusement masks, the witty exchanges between Elizabeth and Darcy reflect the novel's investment in intelligent conversation and verbal sparring as vehicles for both characterization and romantic connection. Their verbal wit becomes evidence of intellectual compatibility and mutual respect. The ability to appreciate each other's humor and to engage in clever repartee demonstrates a meeting of minds that transcends social convention. Austen's irony serves both comic and critical purposes. Humor makes the social critique more palatable and entertaining, while serious observation gains weight through its occasional self-deflating wit. The novel neither preaches nor lectures but allows readers to perceive social absurdities through carefully chosen examples and the ironic commentary of the narrative, voiced literary legacy and influence. Pride and Prejudice has exerted enormous influence on subsequent literature, establishing templates for romantic fiction that remain operative today. The novel established the possibility of presenting female experience and female subjectivity as worthy of serious literary treatment. Elizabeth Bennet became an archetype of the intelligent, independent-minded female protagonist, influencing countless subsequent heroines. The novel's impact extends beyond literature to broader cultural attitudes regarding marriage, women's agency, and individual choice versus social obligation. While Austen operates within her historical moment and certain values she takes for granted, her insistence on the importance of personal integrity, honest self-assessment, and the right to refuse unwanted marriages resonated with each succeeding generation and contributed to shifting attitudes. Regarding women's autonomy, the novel has generated an enormous amount of critical attention and scholarly interpretation. Literary critics have analyzed its engagement with literature and literary criticism, its specific social and historical context, its narrative technique and stylistic achievement, and its psychology of character. The novel has proven sufficiently rich and complex to support multiple and sometimes contradictory interpretations. Contemporary adaptations and retellings, the enduring appeal of Pride and Prejudice has led to numerous adaptations, retellings and reimaginings across various media. Film and television adaptations range from faithful reproductions to contemporary retellings, each emphasizing different aspects of the source material. These adaptations testify to the novel's capacity to transcend its historical specificity and speak to contemporary audiences. Modern retellings have transposed the story to various settings, contemporary America, post-colonial India, and numerous other contexts. These adaptations suggest that the novel's concerns with judgment, self-knowledge, the pressure of social expectation, the search for authentic connection, transcend historical moment and cultural context. What remains constant across these reimagining is Elizabeth's insistence on personal integrity and individual judgment despite social pressure. The prevalence of romantic comedies that feature elements recognizable from Pride and Prejudice, the initially antagonistic couple who eventually recognize their mutual suitability, the emphasis on intelligence and compatibility, rather than mere wealth or status, suggests the novel's deep influence on popular narrative structures. Conclusion: Pride and Prejudice endures as a masterwork of English literature because it operates simultaneously on multiple levels, as entertaining romantic narrative, as penetrating social satire, as psychological character study, and as philosophical meditation on judgment, self-knowledge, and human connection. Jane Austen created not merely a story for her time, but a work that speaks across centuries to fundamental human concerns and capacities. The novel argues, through its narrative and characterization, for the possibility of genuine connection based on mutual respect and intellectual compatibility, even within societies that constrain and pressure individuals toward more expedient choices. Elizabeth Bennet's refusal to compromise her integrity, her insistence on marrying for love and respect rather than economic security, and her achievement of a partnership based on genuine equality remain inspiring and relevant to contemporary readers navigating their own social pressures and personal choices. Austen's Achievement lies not merely in creating memorable characters and entertaining narrative, but in elevating the domestic sphere and female experience to subjects worthy of serious artistic treatment. Her wit and irony make her social criticism palatable and entertaining, while her psychological insight ensures that her characters possess depth and complexity. Pride and Prejudice stands as testament to the power of literature to illuminate human nature and the enduring appeal of authentic human connection achieved through mutual understanding and respect.